So I'm going to speak to this coyote story. This land is currently a wildlife refuge right now, right? And so the last many minutes we've heard about talking about the land, we've talked about it in terms of landfill, right? If we refer to the land as a landfill, we're also precluding all of the other things that land is. Yes, there are concerns there that we need to take seriously. However, there are coyotes, kit foxes, horned lizards, snakes, owls, birds of all kinds, javelina, deer, on and on and on, captured on trail cameras outside of Mission Garden. And so this is the last place in the urban core of Tucson where the Tucson mountains touch the Santa Cruz River. And so this land is healing itself, as our organizing council member, Senora Josefina Cardenas, reminds us. So we already did this stuff. This is from the letter that you all have in that packet as well. So ownership and decision making. So we're going to touch on Rio Nuevo and the Barrio Sin Nombre and Menlo Park Neighborhood Association plans. So this is Rio Nuevo. I'm not going to get into the long history about where Rio Nuevo came from, but Rio Nuevo used to be just this, and now they are doing this. And so they have a lot on their plate. Their new master plan for the next 10 years, the draft of which we got our hands on, and I think earlier this spring, thanks to Raul Ramirez, who made us aware of that. There are about 16 points of things that they want to do, all of them very complex. And one of them is the site here, the Birthplace site, and all of the rest of them are this. And so we were alarmed to see in that report, well, first of all, let me say this, that our understanding is that this land should remain open use. However, Rio Nuevo understands its mandate to be generating tax revenue, meaning, to hear them tell it, and there's disagreement on this, but if they're going to spend any money or do anything with any of their assets, that land has to generate more sales tax revenue, which then goes back into them to generate more sales tax revenue. However, our analysis, our situational analysis of their situation is that they were literally between a rock and a hard place, between the river and the mountain, that they had no play, right? We've been seeing for years that there are various development proposals that come up from time to time. You may remember 2017, it was a velodrome. There's been ideas about luxury condominiums and things like this. But we know that this land, they wouldn't be able to do any of those things, or they're very limited. And some of those reasons are because, number one, this, right, which is the center of our organizing. This is land that is too important to be paved over. This is land that's too important to be put into private hands, period. Number two, the landfill. When I first got involved in the coalition, I heard this word remediation, remediate the landfill, right? Remediation sounds like a positive thing. Would say, oh yeah, of course, why don't we just clean up the landfill, right? But when you think about, and this, my mind was changed or opened to the realities of this thanks to talking to neighbors in Barrio Kroger Lane and Barrio Sin Nombre that had lived through what remediation actually looks, feels, smells, tastes like, and how it impacts their communities. To do the Caterpillar building that you all are probably familiar with on the west side, to hear them tell it, that was 10,000 dump truck loads of the dirt that was dug up out of the ground, driven actually across the landfill, down Grande, and dumped in Los Reales. And then 10,000 more dump truck loads were brought, or a few less because they did some underground parking there, but were brought back with clean fill to fill that up. The estimate that we've heard from Rio Nuevo to do, that was less than 5 acres, I think, probably. But this is 30 acres. And so to hear Rio Nuevo tell it, dig and dump remediation would be 100,000 dump truck loads driving across our city, dumping in Los Reales, shortening the life of the Los Reales landfill. Then that new clean fill, AKA the earth, has to come from somewhere else. So then a new hole would be dug, the same size, And then those dump trucks would come back and dump that in. It would have to be compacted, et cetera, et cetera. Think about the carbon emissions. Think about the dust. Think about the noise. Think about the $30 million plus, and that was a pre-pandemic number of money that it would cost to do that. This is Tucson. I think all of us here in 30 seconds could think of about 10 projects that we would rather spend $30 million on in Tucson on the west side, including things like affordable housing or other things. So we say if the land is not toxic, if it is not impacting the water table and not impacting the neighbors, not impacting the animals, why would you spend $30 million? The question would be, or the answer would be only to develop it. So then this land is also currently zoned R1, which is a very low density. In order to pay for this $30 million, it would have to be rezoned. That gets us to the neighborhood plan that is in process. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But this would require a rezoning against the neighborhood plan, which is the wishes of the neighbors. And our council member in the area, Lane Santa Cruz, has said, committed that they would never vote to support a zoning rechange against the neighborhood plan. So, which is amazing, right? And we also thank Ward 1 for being able to have this space right now also. So shout out to Benny. And last but not least, access, right? If you're going to build something super dense in that area, I don't know if you all have driven on Mission Grande anytime recently, but it is busy and there is no turning lane there. There's no access from the north. And so how would you provide access to that space? It's also far from, it's not a very walkable area. It's not very close to transit. And so up against these things, we realized that Rio Nuevo really actually can't develop this site. Also because any developer that would be interested in this site is going to get a whiff of us and what our wishes are, and they will find somewhere else. And we all know how many empty lots there are in Tucson and how much we need density in other places. And so we knew that this site was not toxic and not suitable for development. And that is put into language here. So this is the draft. This has been in the works for many years and is set to be voted on by mayor and council at the beginning of 2025. And this really codifies what the neighbors want to see in this place. And this is also in the packet. But basically, you can see, continue to look for preserving this space as wildlife corridors and functional open space, right? It goes on to say that they support urban wildlife refuge for this space and wildlife corridor crossings around Cross Grande, and that any environmental study done on a mountain would be results of which would be given quickly to the neighbors. So this is what all of the things we knew. And then in January, when we got our hands on the draft report, we saw this language: a former dump that remains toxic, producing 5 times the legal limit of methane and hydrochloride, making development extremely expensive. Totally unsupported by any science that we have, right? So why would it that the landowner would want to portray this land as toxic? You may even have heard the mayor and council refer to the land as toxic. Ourselves, in our conversations with neighbors, you may have heard the word toxic or chemicals leaching into the groundwater, or we want to reflow the river and so therefore we need to dig and dump the trash. That narrative was invented so that the land could be developed. Okay. Right? And so when we refer to the land in this way, it's not to negate the complexities of the site, but it is to understand that this narrative has been perpetrated for a very specific reason, and that when we continue to talk about the space in those terms, that we make that future more possible rather than the future that the neighbors and indigenous folks want to see. So this is also from their same report. They're talking about a toxicology report, which is not at all what that thing is. Talk about private developers to dredge and haul the toxic material, and then mixed-use development. This is actually concession to us because they knew we were organizing, and so they included open space in their draft report. But there's also sewer lines and gas lines running across that property that they can't build on. And so it could be very easy to imagine a scenario and say, oh, we have something for everybody. Here's your open space. It's 3 feet wide by 100 feet long, right? So we went to work, and we've been working really hard for the last 2 years, having meetings with various stakeholders and various people to show them the science that's been done. In fact, the hydrogeochem letter that's in your packet is written by the scientists who conducted the study in 2015. We showed them this Rio Nuevo master plan, and we said, hey, could you help us understand how these two things fit together? And they said, absolutely, they do not. And so they wrote a letter further clarifying the situation, which is the letter that Chuk was just referring to. Then in 2024, beginning of this year, Tucson Water had to report on their findings of the bottom of the dump being inundated with water, and the fact that there is absolutely no contamination has been shown in that space. And so we brought these things to Rio Nuevo, to folks on the Rio Nuevo board, to the chairman, Fletcher McCusker, and to their master plan review session at the TCC in September. And we presented all of this information to them. And we said, there are other alternatives for this space, namely open space, namely a wildlife refuge, and you have no path to developing it. And who do you want to be? Do you want to be the enemy and have this entire coalition fight you every step for something that's probably very unlikely to happen? Or do you want to be the hero of this story? Do you want to be on the right side of Tucson's history and the right side of Tucson's future? And because of our organizing, because of our people power, we left them no choice. So we did a little bit of this. Yes, at the meeting in September, they heard a presentation that I gave that recapped these same points, and a motion was made by Corky Poster, a member of the Rio Nuevo board, to strike all references to development from the 2025-2035 Rio Nuevo master plan, and it passed unanimously. They gave up. It is time for us to stop thinking in terms of opposing and fighting a potential development that could come at any minute, and to continue to go on the offensive and keep our eyes on the future and on the positive, on the agenda that we ourselves are identifying and moving forward. After that motion, the board chairman, Fletcher McCusker himself, made a motion to bring the Rio Nuevo master plan in total alignment with the neighborhood plan, and that also passed unanimously. So that means, yes. So that we did not expect to win so hard so quick, but we did. And that's because of the work that we've all been doing, the relationships we've been cultivating with ourselves and with the land. And so now Rio Nuevo formally wants what the neighborhood associations and what the neighbors want. And so our job is to help make that real. What is the puzzle piece to get figured out now? The thing that Rio Nuevo is the most worried about is being sued. They really don't want to be sued. They really don't like being sued. And so they are afraid that if they go forward with a non-dig and dump remediation or no remediation, letting the land continue to heal itself as it has been for the last 60 years, as Chuk said, 20 years of monitoring, no contaminants. Keep in mind, this is a 1950s era landfill. This is a pre-plastics era landfill, right? This is mostly household waste. Their fear is that in some point in the future, town of Marana is going to discover something in the water, trace it back to this one landfill, and sue Rio Nuevo, which would necessitate them suing the city of Tucson as the original polluter and kicking off a whole political kerfuffle based off that. Given what we've seen with the amount of PFAS contaminations coming from other places, given the amount of other actual true Superfund sites in the area, other closed, we believe those are far more likely to be an issue than a landfill that, as Chuk says, is a very benign landfill. Nonetheless, Rio Nuevo wants to be indemnified against future risk. They want someone else to take on the risk when the land is transferred to them to say, yes, we will be responsible for any future harm. That's a very, very difficult ask for another landowner to take on, even with this science, right? Because there's still the question mark of, could there be some thing in there that hasn't surfaced in the last 60 years and suddenly could? So this is the question we don't know the answer to, right? And we're not going to probably figure the answer out now, but this is us welcoming in new thoughts and going out to your networks and folks who do work in the legal arena and the land arena to work on this idea of indemnification. Because Rio Nuevo is ready to give away this land. Our analysis was they regret the day they ever took this on as a development district, this undevelopable land. And then at the last meeting, Fletcher said as much. He said, if only I knew then what I know now. And so they're ready to give the land away. We believe actually the land would assess as having a value of $0.00. Because whatever that land is worth, you would have to determine, so you say it's worth, $5 million. Then you would have to spend $30 million remediating it before you could build on it. And so that means it has actually a negative value to them, not to the coyotes, not to the birds, not to the folks who cherish it, right? And so they will give it away. The question is to who, right? And so that kind of brings us to our next question.